pleased to welcome you to the opening reception for Emily Wells' Fever and this associated conversation between Alan Frame, Emily Wells, and Rachel Stern. Emily is the Berman Museum of Art's 2026 Visiting Artist in Residence, and this is a credit-bearing opportunity that connects interested students from across the curriculum with a visiting artist to assist with research, fabrication, and installation. And I'd like to thank and acknowledge the 2026 participants. If you'll either stand or just wave your hand if you want to. Erin Cactus, Lucy Babashevsky, Hayden James, right in front, and Carolyn Urich. So one of the striking aspects of this year's exhibition Fever is the degree to which it changes under light and weather conditions. So for this reason, after the conclusion of this program, the gallery will remain open until 7:15, and I invite you to take some time looking at the work in the dusk. And then at 7:15, you're all welcome to join the artist on the Berman lawn outside of the building, and the curtains will go up and you'll get to see the amazing video as the light is falling. So please think about sticking around, and it's a very dramatic shift that happens over time. So it's really exciting. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce tonight's speakers, and maybe I should introduce myself too. I forgot to do that, but my name is Deborah Barkin. I'm the creative director here at the Berman Museum of Art, and I will introduce our speakers in the order that you'll hear from them. And after they each speak, there will be a conversation between the three of them and then an opportunity for audience Q&A. So Rachel Stern is a photographer whose work considers the intersection of beauty and power. Her photo-based installations turn to the tableau and the proscenium, creating dialogue between the histories and uses of kitsch and leftist aesthetics. Using materials culled from strip malls and thrift stores, she creates images which ask art and visual culture to enter into a discourse of accessibility and demand immediate access to beauty. Her work imagines a world that might be built out of a world that is. It is a kitsch paradise, a queer-washed history, and an attempt at hope. Stern received her BFA in photography and the history of art and visual culture from the Rhode Island School of Design. She attended Skowhegan and graduated from Columbia University with an MFA in visual arts. She has exhibited her work at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, Baxter Street, Brandeis University, Ortega y Gasset Project, Invisible Exports, and Asaya Geisberg Gallery, among many others. Her work has been featured in numerous publications, including Bomb, Interview Magazine, the New York Times, and also in Hyperallergic, one of my favorites. She is a regular contributor to photo illustrations to the New York Times and an assistant professor of photography at Union College. Emily Wells. She forges a bridge between pop and chamber music, polymathic composure. She's a producer and visiting artist who builds songs from deliberate strata of vocals, synths, drums, piano, string, and wind instruments. Wells has toured extensively throughout the world, including performances at Lincoln Center, the Guggenheim Museum, and the National Gallery of Art. She has released 6 critically acclaimed albums, including This World Is Too Blank for You, which was labeled as visionary by NPR, and Regards to the End, which Pitchfork characterized as complex, vibrant, and dynamic. Recent collaborations include the premiere of The Glass Age in choreographed musical dialogue with conceptual artist Alex DeCorte at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and Regards to the End as expanded cinema with the Boston Symphony Orchestra at ICA Boston. Wells' evocative music, which has been described as thrilling by Pitchfork, and performances called quietly transfixing by the New York Times, impel listeners to be attuned. Her latest release, the 10-song album Regards to the End, explores the AIDS crisis, climate change, and her lived experience watching the world burn. A work of radical empathy, regards to the end, foregrounds the power of art, critique, and care to connect and to perhaps redeem us. Alan Frame is a photographer, writer, and curator based in New York, where he has had numerous solo exhibitions at Gitterman Gallery and released 4 books of photography, including Whereupon, Inamorado, Fever, and Detour. A winner of the 2017-2018 Rome Prize from the American Academy in Rome, he is an adjunct professor of photography at Pratt Institute, also teaching at the School of Visual Arts and the International Center of Photography, and for Strudel Media Live. He has curated solo shows of the work of Darrell Ellis and Charles Henry Ford, among others, and many group exhibitions. In 1983-84, he co-directed Sounds in the Distance, based on writing by David Wojnarowicz, and lived in London from 1985 to 87, directing and writing about experimental theater for Baum and other publications. Throughout the 1990s, he toured internationally with the epic photo slideshow about AIDS called Electric Blanket, a project that he co-created for visual aids. He grew up in Mississippi and has lived in New York City since 1977. Please join me in welcoming our guest tonight.
Well, I'm really happy to have you all here, and especially, I know we're at school, but I'm always happy to be in a room full of students, so I'm really happy to be here with all of you guys, and with these 2 artists that I think are so incredible. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but before they do that, I wanted to introduce how I inadvertently introduced them to each other. So this is Alan's book called Fever. I don't think you can get your hands on it even if you wanted to anymore.
No, it's completely sold out.
Sorry. Maybe your library has it. Ask your library to try and get it for you if they don't.
I brought a copy for your library.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. Problem solved. Use the library. So this is a book published by my friend Matt Leifheit, who has an imprint called Matt Editions. And when I first met Emily, I think it was for your birthday, I gave you a copy of this book because I had made a portrait of Emily for her album, Regards to the End, which you should be listening to on repeat all the time, and if you're not, today's a good day to start. And these photographs just reminded me of the album. I've known Alan's work for a long time, and mostly the black and white pictures, which I think is often what people encounter first. And I think of Alan's pictures as being photographs that kind of like punch a hole right through the middle of you. And I think Emily's songs do a very similar thing. So I gave this book to Emily, and Emily clearly went on a journey with it. And it led us to the work that we're experiencing in the gallery today. So I just think that's a beautiful thing that a book can do, and I think photo books are really special for that reason. They can be passed around and have intimate moments. And then I also just wanted to mention the first time that you guys actually met each other, which was at Candace Mady Gallery. We were there for, is Todd here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so both Todd, I haven't got to say hi to Todd yet, so wherever you are, hi Todd. But no, there you are. Todd and Sam had a show together at Candace Mady Gallery, and we were there at the opening, and I was talking to Alan, I think, about Garth Greenwell, because I had just finished reading a Garth Greenwell book, and we were talking about writing. And Emily came up and I was able to introduce them. And so I just think books are a really important place to start our conversation. And I'm actually gonna go join the audience for a second while you two do this visual component. And then I'll come back and we'll have a conversation together.
Thank you all so much for being here. This is a total thrill. Thank you, Rachel, Alan, Deborah, thank you so much. As you can see, pictured, I'm really into doubles, as you can tell from the exhibition as well. So, just to give a little context to the show, because it's its unveiling. Essentially, I fell in love with this book. It's full of photographs that Alan took of friends, people he knew and loved in 1981, and I simultaneously have been writing an opera that takes place in 1981. And I was trying to figure out how to record that opera, and essentially decided maybe I could try to do a lot of it myself, but that felt a little heavy and impossible. So I started casting this band out of photographs from the book that I could perform as or inhabit, maybe take on some of their characteristics. This was the first photo I took of myself, and this is a private photograph, but I'm still going to share it here. This is the first time I was Boone. And Boone is created from, was kind of the first person in the book that I really encountered in this way. His real name is Charlie Boone, and I called him Boone Charlie, and he's a drummer. And I always wanted to be a drummer, and Boone helped me to be one. And I slowly started becoming other people and recording this record. And I was using this tape machine to record a lot of it. And in some ways that informed the whole show, because I started really being interested in what abandoned technologies have to offer us in the present, and what they ask us to do, and also how they break the myth of infinity that digital technology proposes to us. And it also gave me lots of trouble, and good and bad trouble, trying to figure out how to make it work, how to make it work in 2026. But it stands up, I was inside of the 4-track that I had to open it up and getting talked through how to repair it with this man over the phone, and I said, I bet you won't be able to do this to a MacBook in 40 years, because that machine's 40 years old, it's out there. So I wanted to share just a few little things. I don't want to take up too much time, because you've got the show out there, and I really want to hear from Alan and get a chance to talk. But there's a headphone piece that you can walk around with, and I've taken great joy in seeing many of you listening, but I thought maybe we could listen to a little bit of it together. And I wanted to, again, it's kind of like showing a selfie. There's text that is from my daily writing practice throughout the process of making this record.
January 2nd, 2025, Canonian Town, morning. I'm sitting in the sun with the bedroom door cracked. There's a record player. John Coltrane's
Oh, it's
ballads.
so quiet.
Last night dreamt of a maze of studios in an old studio building in Brooklyn that had been gilded. And where my studio had been, a glassed-in room with human beasts moving about within, naked, distorted, deformed, and exposed within the velvet interior. And me remembering the recordings I needed to make, and the excitement toward those recordings. I believe it's time at last to start recording again.
Okay, so I'm going to keep moving through the images. I wanted to talk a little bit about how I made the videos in this room. Again, back to the abandoned technologies. On the top, you see the Sony Trinicon from 1981. You actually have to have it also connected to this Betamax VCR-like object in order to record. And this is a still of an image that it might make. And these are a few in-process shots as I was making the work itself. It's such a beautiful object. I just wanted to photograph it like it was a person. And then the other one is from 1981. This was a gift from someone in the room, Alex Jackson, that helped me span the years. Okay. And there's an image, and you can kind of see how the technology changed across time. So that's a similar gesture, but filmed through the other camera. And this is something filmed by that camera as well. And then just kind of how I approached. So I would take projections. So there's videos of videos of videos. You know what I mean? This is Norm's station here. Norm's the engineer. That's Jody's station. She's the pianist. Then I took photographs of projections, digital images that were kind of snapshots through the course of my life as I was making the record, and photographed them with a film camera. So again, felt like if I could have the past and the future talk to each other, and I could have these old lenses, that was my only way to actually enter this period of time that I was, that I've been so interested in, and that I felt like I was inhabiting. Some of those. And you'll see a few drawings in the space. I kind of became obsessed drawing. I didn't hang very many of them, but the drawings were made of the, I think he's gonna start playing. Yeah. This is what some of the drawings inside my studio that were, is it playing? No, okay, that were, they felt like these sort of devotional bursts of just being with the different people. I don't know why it's not playing, but okay, now I got it. My lesson is being remembered. Well, maybe not. Then I started projecting onto the drawings as well. And it's just kind of a way to be with the people that I created and the actual images in this really intimate way. When you draw someone or something, it is quite intimate. You know, maybe taking a photo is the same way, especially when it's a really intentional photograph. And then you'll also see around the gallery a few objects. Jody is the pianist, and Jody loves to bring little treats back to the studio. And so she'll often bring a shell or a photo or a bottle of whiskey or some little bit of something delicious, and play her parts and leave again. And so Jody was the only one that I ever felt like I could be outside of the studio. And Jody likes to, Jody finds beauty in everything, so she's really fun to be. And yeah, that I want to turn it over to Ellen.
Are those all gifts Jody brought to
Those
the
are all,
studio?
yes, those are all gifts that Jody brought to the studio. There's a couple. There you go.
So I'm gonna try to keep track of time because I think that the action is usually in the Q&A and all the conversation, and I could talk forever about the context of this work, but I'm gonna keep it to a minimum. So I'm gonna watch my watch here, and I'm starting with a picture of my closest friend, whose name is Butch. Her real name is Mary Elizabeth, but her older brother nicknamed her Butch, and it stuck because it was funny, because she was so petite, but she was so tough at the same time. She grew up in Mississippi like I did, and we met in Boston. I was going to college in Boston, and she was studying ballet. Her mother had moved back there after her father died, and we did this long trip together by car from Boston to Memphis and got to know each other on that trip, and then have been friends ever since. And she figures in this prominently. There she is with my first New York boyfriend, Paul, who just died last year. So after, and I'll try to mention their names too, since Emily has done such an interesting job of using some of the names and turning them around and creating characters from these names. This is Daryl Ellis, an artist whose work has been celebrated very much in the last few years, but was kind of forgotten for 30 years. He died in 1992 from AIDS-related causes. Close friend of mine. But to get my story to New York, I was studying in Boston, went back to Mississippi for 3 years to photograph. And while I'm talking, I'm just going to continue to show these pictures. While I was in Boston, fortunately, I wound up taking photography courses outside of the college, among Boston photo hipsters of the time that included Nan Golden and her circle of friends that I got to be friends with before they all went to the museum school. Rather than having a much more academic kind of training if I had done it in college where the Bauhaus reigned and there was a very, very formal and academic approach to photography. So I got into this other scene. So I had all these friends from my Boston days. Then I was in Mississippi. After 3 years, I felt bored and stuck. I was photographing there. I liked what I was doing, but this is the one picture that is not from 1981. It's from 1982, and it's of me. And it's by my boyfriend that I met in 1982, and he figures in later work that you will see. But so I came to New York, and as a lot of my friends from Boston were also moving to New York. Nan moved to New York in 1977, Butch moved there in 1977, Jody, who's a name that comes up in this, there she is, came around that time. So I moved to a city where I knew the most people, and it was really going to be LA, but it wound up in New York. And then I had this scene here that I was already part of, which was really great. But it took a few years to actually have a real queer circle of friends that I really wanted and was trying to find. And I met these guys around 80, 81. So by 1981, when I took all of these pictures, I had my Boston friends, and then I had these New York friends. This is Charlie Boone on the right, and Bill Jacobson, and they were partners through the 80s.
Spitting image.
And this is Frank Moore on the right, and you saw one of the drawings that had those stripes and the character that Emily has created. And by the way, Emily, I just feel so grateful, honored, flattered, inspired by your work, and that my work could have meaning to you, and that you could do something with it. And over that, all these years that have elapsed, I mean, even for me, seeing this work come alive is kind of a startling, unexpected thing that happened, because this color work existed within a larger body of work that was mostly black and white at the time. Color was harder to print, it was more expensive to process, and I would only process rolls of film if I felt there was something good in the roll. Otherwise, I put it in a bag and save it. By the end of the 80s, I had about 80 saved rolls that I hadn't processed. I developed a couple of them to see if they were still good. They weren't. They had all sorts of things, streaks through them, and I threw them away, which was such a huge mistake, because today with Photoshop you could take all of that out. But maybe they weren't any good anyway, and I got enough anyway. But I wound up not even making that many prints. This is Olivier, and Emily has a character, Oliver, and Jody. Maybe I made about 10 prints myself, but at a certain point, I had the chance to do a show of anything I wanted in Zurich a few years ago with a young artist that I had met doing that residency in Rome. And I thought, young people are really into the 80s. I should go back to the 80s and do some of that work. So I made these prints then, but I made darker and color prints, and showed them in this friend's studio in Zurich. And when I came back, Matt Leifheit, who is Rachel's and my connection together, who published the book Fever, was teaching at Pratt and invited me to speak. I talked about this work that I had just shown, and he's like, after the class, he said, "We should do a book, do you want to do a book?" And I was like, yes. So then it was like, well, how many pictures do I have? Do I have enough for a book? Because most of them had never even been printed, except in little, prints this size when they were processed. And then I found 50. And that was just amazing, because by that point I had so much distance from that year, from that experience and that work, that it was as if it were done by someone else, and I could just sort of ask all these questions of it. But so a couple of years later, I did a book of the black and white work of that period, and this is Paul again, who was in that second picture, the year that I met him, the first year that I moved to New York, in my inexpensive furnished studio apartment. And for this work, I had a lot of vintage prints, so I had a show. And then this Italian photographer friend of mine who wanted to start a press was in New York and came to the show and wanted to do a book of this work, which she did beautifully. She's also a designer, and she's also released it in the most conscientious, tireless way, and still promoting it. And we're going to do another book of that 70s work I did in Mississippi next. And at this point I really trust her design, and I really want to see how an Italian, looks at this much grittier kind of work that I did in Mississippi. Almost all in black and white, but some color. So as you can see, the black and white work has a lot of the same people, a lot of the same feeling and themes, but because it's in black and white, and maybe for other reasons, there's something more somber and serious feeling about it. I think there's a kind of melancholy, maybe. In the color work in 1981, I had just become roommates with Butch, and I wanted to photograph in color, and I didn't want to use flash, and I wanted to get people over to my apartment, so we started having brunches, because the light at noon and 1 o'clock would be, strong enough for me to take these color pictures. And that was the impetus to do all of that. And then it also just, in New York people are very busy, but they will always come to dinner or food or a brunch, so it worked. And then I also photographed in their apartments, and that's Nan on the street, and that's in my apartment. Frank, who came to the picture this year, 1982, and Dan Mahoney, who was an artist from Boston, who is one of the many men in these pictures who died by 1992 from age-related causes. When I did the book, I did interviews with 8 living artists and I did a show at Matt's Space in Bed-Stuy in New York, creating 2 big walls, salon style, using a lot of the work of the artists that were still living and some of the work of people who had died that I had in my collection, and a selection of pictures of Fever. But the interviews, and I guess the point I wanted to make about that, the interviews were great. A lot of those people were such great talkers. Butch could go on endlessly, like me, because she's from the South. But one thing that she said really struck me, which was that she never had such deep connections, friendships, as she did in those years with her women friends who were Nan Golden and Katie Nolan, who both became, superstar artists. But at the time they weren't. And Butch wound up having a gallery in the East Village that she co-owned with someone else for a few years and gave us all shows. I think it was Nan's first solo show in New York, and mine too. No, my second one, but it was a little storefront. And Butch had gone from being a ballet dancer to an actress. I was also working in theater, got into it as a performer and then a director, and then went back to photography, pretty much. But when she said that, I was just kind of like really struck by that, because I haven't had that feeling in my life. It's just, I feel like every few years, teaching, every year you meet a new group of extraordinary people. And I teach in multiple schools. And New York is so full of extraordinary people. It's too full of extraordinary, it's too many of them. And, but she moved upstate to the country where she's very social and has a very social world. But for her to say that she'd never had anything like what she had. And it was also an incredible time for me, all of these relationships with other artists. But I guess, I don't know, I found that, because it actually reminded me of something that my mother experienced. We lived in a little town of about 7,000 people in my early childhood, and my mother's, all of her best friends in life were women in that town. And once we moved, of course, she sort of kept up with them, but they didn't see each other that much, and she never had anything like that. And I guess we think that our lives are just going to be on repeat in a certain way. But, hearing about that, just, it's kind of crazy for me to think about outliving or living long past an experience that's that intense that you will not have again. I don't know what to do with that, but one thing I'm doing with that myself is getting into autobiographical fiction, and I've been writing a novel about that time in the 70s with the people that were there in Mississippi with me when I went back to photograph, which has been great. And a lot of them have died, but it's me going into and questioning those experiences, which at the time, as a photographer, I feel like as a photographer, you can sort of remain, or you could, at least in this style of photography, unconscious and intuitive. But I think as a writer, you have to be a lot more conscious. And writing a character based on myself, you have to address the questions of why did he do that? What is he feeling about it? I didn't ask myself what I was feeling about things. I just felt them, and I took pictures, So to return to that is almost psychoanalytic, to treat that in fiction. And I'll conclude with this, because when the book came out, after being roommates with Butch, I was roommates with a close friend of ours named Jane Warwick, who was from the UK. She was an artist who'd gone to the Royal College of Art, and she was sort of writing these experimental texts with pictures. And she gave that up and moved on to printmaking years later, but Butch got a boyfriend and moved to live with him, and Jane moved in with me, and so Jane and I had a year together before I moved in with Frank across town. Jane took all these pictures of us, but she didn't ever show them to us or process them, and I don't remember her ever even having a camera. So when Fever came out, she started scanning them and sending these pictures to us, and I was just like, because one, there aren't any pictures of me. I was a photographer and I didn't do self-portraits. So here I am finally in some pictures, and that's me in the middle, Frank on the end. Frank also is a photographer and has been teaching for years at ICP now at Pratt. And we were all just amazed by these pictures because none of us remember her doing it at all. And so I wanted to put them in the book, and I put them, they're threaded through the text that I wrote at the back of Whereupon, the black and white second book. And on that note, I will pass it over to you, Rachel.
Great.
And also I want to say, Deborah, and everybody at Ursinus, thank you for welcoming me and inviting me. This is amazing to come and be part of this. And it's so, I mean, it feels like the music sounds. It's very, I feel like we're in this liminal thing. Through different time. Time does not exist.
Yes.
We're not in our own, we're merging with other bodies and characters.
Well, that's perfect because I want to talk to you guys about time travel. So, I love looking at Alan's pictures. I love showing her pictures to students. And I really like listening to the pictures and having the music come in. It does feel like something out of time. And the wall text that you wrote talks about this idea of time travel. And I was thinking about time travel happening really in two ways in both of your projects and in the way that this project is collaborative, which is in one part through technology, and you use different types of technology to do that, both like the sound technology and the image technology. But I think photography, I'm a photo evangelist, so I'm prone to sing its praises. But I think photography in particular has this uncanny ability to transport a moment in time, and I don't just mean obviously it's documenting an instant that we're then looking at, but I also mean there's something maybe magical about literal light reflecting off of you and bouncing through this lens onto a piece of plastic with silver on it, and then that light passing through that piece of plastic up through a projector onto another piece of paper with silver on it, and there's this sort of imbuing transfer of things that now I can look at you twice, and that's some sort of strange time travel that light provided. Excuse me. So that's sort of like there's the technology that you are both using. But then I'm also thinking about community as a moment for time travel, and in particular, the way that this is sort of a lived communal experience that you had, that you've sort of, I don't know, you're like the uninvited guest to the party.
Totally.
Like you've inserted yourself into and sort of commandeered.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to ask you guys about maybe time travel as a poetic framework, but to think about those two things, like technology and community, and how they have framed the things that you've worked on.
There's a line in the text of the sound piece. I said, "These men are not ghosts. They're teaching me more about aloneness than I could ever do on my own." And I feel like in some ways that sort of sums up my uninvitedness, but also what it felt like to inhabit, and how alive. I think when I wrote to you, I said, everyone feels so alive to me, and I know so many of them are no longer in this realm, but there's this way in which they continue to live through your work. And then in some ways I do feel like I brought them to life anew, through whatever this play and performance I was doing completely alone in my studio, and how real they became. But I did sometimes contend with my aloneness in that, and my uninvitedness in that. But the photographs felt so intimate and open that I did feel invited, like that, in a sense,
Well, and one of the things that's so beautiful is that it's resulted in an actual invitation,
Right.
Which is that, like you're literally looking at Alan from another time.
Yes.
And it was an opportunity to forge an actual invited friendship in this moment, which I just think is so beautiful. So I think the uninvitedness is actually maybe the least interesting part. Like, I was reading Drew's text in Fever and about the brunches, and I was thinking about brunch, like as like a conceptual space, and all of the little snacks that we're eating here. and what it means to like forge a connection with someone. And in one instance, it's literally sitting at brunch with someone. But in another, like you forged a connection
Sure.
by being the uninvited guest at the party.
Totally. And I think I've thought about that a lot with being a musician and creating something that lives in people's lives in such an intimate way, and I'm not physically there. But there becomes this exchange that I have given over, you know, I've given this over for it to then become part of someone's life. And it's reanimated every time someone experiences it, you know, which is, to me, one of my most favorite things about music, you know. Anyway.
I think reanimation, I'm interested in you going back to the color dark room and what it felt like to like look, you know, when the book was launched, Matt gave away your test strips, and I have some, which when I give the book out to the students and they fall out of the book, they're like, what is this? And we get to kind of talk about being in the color dark room. But I wonder what the experience was to look at the photographs again in the space of producing them rather than just like reviewing an archive.
Well, you know, I worked with a lab, but it's a very small mom and pop lab. It's just wonderful, called My Own Color Lab.
Oh, yeah.
And the printer was a young SVA grad named Cooper Winterson, who I recently discovered also is a great black and white printer. So now he's doing both when I need that, because I never was a great color printer. So, you know, and going back to these negatives, because some of them faded, but they faded in different ways and across the negative in different ways, you know. So they were a little tricky to print, and he had the patience to do that. But I would come in and consult, and so there were always, when I was coming in, all these test strips, and I was like, Cooper, save them. And then, yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do with them, but then that was at the book launch, we just like, you know, take it like a bookmark, you know.
A test strip is like, for those non-photographers in the house, it's like a little piece of photo paper you rip, so because photo paper is expensive. So when you're making a print, before you use a full sheet, you use like a little piece to make sure the color is right. So they function like bookmarks, or these like little strips. And
But you know, this idea about inviting yourself, like I think I encourage everybody to invite yourself to things that you're interested in, even if it's just Instagram, you know, like connecting with people, asking, because I've met some people and had, you know, very important things happen that way. I mean, me going to try to interview someone, getting to know them, or, you know, whatever, intruding into their private world to do something with the project, whatever. And then amazing relationships develop, but also people contacting me through Instagram and things happening from that. And but also, you know, this, use the word realm, this other realm that I think they're in, and we're in this realm for a while. Yeah, and you know, when they're in that other realm, they're not just that character they were here with that name and only that name. They are also carrying their many lives of other experiences. And I don't know, you know, like couldn't, you know, who could be too detailed about it unless you're like really a medium and can channel and see them and feel that. And I'm all into that. And but I think, you know, also like changing the names and changing them a little bit, because I was thinking there's bound to be one of them here with us. And if I had to say which one, I would say it's Charlie Boone, because I feel like that's the one that resonates in your work. Somehow it's like, even when you say his name or you tell the story about him. And
he's really been my guide into the whole thing, I would say. I was so drawn to his photos, first and foremost. I felt like I kept going back to them. And he kind of was the one, I almost felt like invited, and not to keep harping on that word, but invited into, like, just play, you know? And the first video that you see when you come down the stairs, the two horses running toward each other, is called Me and Boone, and, or Boone and Me, rather. And it was the first video I made for these interior videos. And it was such an incredible experience because I felt as though I essentially, I took one video, I flipped it around and created the illusion that two horses were running toward each other. And in that moment, it was the visualization of the project because it felt like me and Boone running toward each other and we could never meet. We were bound to never meet through this thing we all share, which is time, but boy, were we trying, and in that sense, that video helped me understand how to make all the rest of the videos. And he was always that person for me, for sure.
Yeah, and there's the line like you had a crush or something.
Yeah,
Like,
I said everyone has a crush on him.
Yeah, it was
I
true.
do.
Yeah.
Also
Totally.
true in real life.
True for me. True for
Yeah, I mean, you can tell he's got swag. He really does. And obviously, for my selfie, I was trying to inhabit that too. Good drummers have to have swag. They really do. It's you got to have confidence to drum well, I think. And he made me a better drummer. Like I played things that I could never play as me. But when I put that bandana on, it's on.
He was also very mystical and just way out there
Really?
in his beliefs, yeah. And channel things.
I'm here for it.
Well, I mean,
I'm
you
here
talk
for it.
about the band helping bear the burden of
Yes.
creation.
Yes.
You say it more eloquently than that, but I do think, like photographs are the perfect medium for a crush on a stranger, right? Like you think about celebrity like it's one of the things that photographs do
Yeah.
is they can, it's anything you want the person to be, but it's, just very flat, and they don't have to let you down, or, they can be whatever you want.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to hear you talk a little bit about that sort of like sharing the burden,
Yeah.
especially knowing that he's this mystical being. I mean, maybe he was really literally helping.
Totally. Well, again, this is a line from the text piece if you spend some time with it. And I love invoke Alex's name, but Alex, who's in this room, said, "You invented the band to bear the burden of creation." And it really struck me, and I also realized, and to tie in the other work that's in the other room that becomes alive in the evening after the sun goes down, that's video work that I've been building over 10 years, and it usually sits behind me as I perform live. And I invented, they were kind of these companions. There's a lot of contemporary dance and AIDS activists, and they are there. They were these companions for me on stage, again, to bear the burden of creation or the burden of performance for me. And it really, being an artist can be incredibly lonely, I mean, there's, especially working alone in a studio, and sometimes it pointed out my loneliness, having these ghosts around me, having these characters around me, and sometimes I felt like they were really, really there. But they did. They helped me make everything. Couldn't have made it without them. And I know it sounds absurd. I talk about them like they're real people. Deborah and I had a lot of fun joking. And she said, we're putting together the names of all the videos, and she said, well, there's this, sort of errant 7 here. There's no title. Is that on purpose? Like, is that no, like that's just an extra 7. But, you would imagine it could be true by the way I talk about it.
Well, I think also, I think it's probably time to open up to questions. So I guess I actually won't ask I think I should be generous because I've gotten to ask a lot. So before I dive into my next one, is there anybody among us, spirit or human, that might did anybody bring their Ouija board? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts about the exhibition was seeing all the found objects around, specifically a lot of the clothing items. I found them arranged so intricately, especially them on the wall, the jacket there, the bandana. And I was wondering what power do you think those hold in the transformative aspect?
I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah, thank you. I didn't, not all the costumes are seen, but they're seen in the videos. They were vital. anytime I became the person, I would change into the thing. Even if it was like, I was, there's a point where I was being Norm, the engineer, and the engineer gets stuck with a lot of the labor of editing and finding the right performance, and then I wanted to redo this bass part, so I became Moreland, and I put on his shirt, and I described this to you when I first wrote you. It's as though I really felt them passing each other in the hallway, and it was kind of profound. And that was kind of the moment where I was like, oh, I'm really into this. I'm in this. This is real for me. But yeah, I would have to wear the and it was also like being a kid. I hadn't had that moment of make believe since I was like 9, where like some object can really charge and transform me into being something else.
I think clothing too. I'm going to continue to plug libraries. If you ever go to a special collections at a library, the first thing you should ask is like, where are the textiles? Because if you want to understand someone from another time and place, and you can see their sweat stains, you'll have some sense that they were like a real person in a real body. And so I do think that and also Joan Jonas, best thing I learned in grad school, when you wear a hat, you get to be a different person. And so I think that that's, clothing in particular has a power to do that.
Absolutely.
I think there was a question over there. Oh, okay, go for it.
I mean, I just kind of wanted to ask about sort of the relationship between you trusting someone else to kind of interpret the people that you found to be important to you in your past. And I wanted to kind of ask, did you go through stories talking about these people often, or was a lot of the burden of interpreting on you?
No, it was all on Emily. Emily did it without me completely.
Yeah.
So she's it's hers. And I'm, I'm hugely supportive of that, because work that I'm making now, also, I work with a lot of found things, and found photographs, and drawings, and things by unidentified people. And so somehow, there's a connection with that, and what that's about. And I, also knowing how great a musician she is, I was just like, yes. But it's also my attitude, with the books, that, I trusted Matt Lifehide. He's I trust his work as a photographer, as a publisher, a teacher. Also, the other one, Michaela Palermo, I've known her. I taught her years ago. I know them, and when it gets to design in a book, they either are designing or they have a good designer, and I'm not a designer, and I just want to be kind of hands-off and, respect that creative work that's going on collaboratively, instead of trying to be a micromanaging control freak, And I don't know, I just feel like that there's room for all of our stuff,
Yeah, I should say I got all into this, never even knowing if I'd show or tell anyone about it. And it kind of got out of my hands in the sense that I did want to try to feel a way to describe it visually, and I had this incredible opportunity to be the visiting artist here and make this show. So I was like, how cool would it be to try to make this visual? I had met Alan, but I had not told him that I was doing any of this. And so I sent him what I deemed a love letter, both telling and asking for permission in one breath, I would say. And I'm very lucky that you trusted me and weren't like, yo, proprietary here. I didn't get that feeling from you. When I met you, I would have been shocked if that had been your response, but I was also very, very, very happy. It was a very happy day to receive your response, for sure.
Yeah, no, I couldn't be more thrilled, to have something from that long ago affecting somebody of another generation who's creative and wants to go with it. It's just a dream. It's great.
I think we can do one more question. Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering why specifically you chose horses for Boone, because I noticed that it was mainly only him that had horses, so I was just wondering why specifically you decided on that.
I love that. Well, I'm actually the horse in the drawings. I didn't really want to draw myself, so I just kept obsessively drawing horses. And as me, a kind of both powerful and helpless creature at once in the world. And so, no, it just felt right, you know? It felt like my way in to talk to him was for us to both to be a horse on a highway.
It was a lie. We can do one more. Does anybody have one more? I saw one in the back. Did you get shy? Oh no, I'm gonna go for the one in the front.
I think you should.
She can ask questions whenever she wants.
I'm just interested if you could talk a little bit more about the choice of opera.
Oh.
Yeah, and like, because that feels like it's just such an old, like, I think of that as like a really kind of like a 19th century art form, and we're talking about the kind of time and the remnants of time, and it's just interesting to think about that as like the focus.
Well, I mean, to be clear, I mean, I'm thinking about this bigger story that I'm trying to tell as an opera only because I think opera gives you permission to be really dark and wild, and not necessarily because I'm interested in following the form or what my impression of what opera is. More so like, I just am thinking of it as a permission structure in a way, and a way to tell a story through music, and say, hey, this is a framework, you know. I'm less thinking about it as a form in terms of how it situates itself in time or in our conception of opera, because you'll hear in the music. I mean, this is the most operatic piece of the work that I've made for it. It's not. If you listen to it, you never say, "Oh, I'm listening to an opera," but I'm making it and I'm calling it that. So like, that's what it is. And it is. It's more than just that. I'm not trying to like Chalamet this. But I have a lot of respect for the form in its like more traditional way. But you're like, well, he's canceled as well.
I just want to say one thing about your rendition of Fever. It's so great. I listened to that today, actually. And Peggy Lee, you know, I associate with it the most. And when I was in high school, my best friend and I were driving in the country after school with this, what do they call it, not a substitute teacher, but you know, a teacher in training. I can't remember what the word was. But you know, she's young, she was also from the South, and she, turns out, was a singer who performed in like Southern nightclubs, and she sang Fever for us, a cappella. And it was just like, first time I'd heard it live, and she was great. And I always think of that experience, and then I loved it. You know, like when I was trying to find a title for this book, titles can be difficult, and they're, in photography, they're often about time or light. And so I've tried to go with music and song titles, so I thought of that, Fever. But it was also just coming out of the pandemic, so Fever had this other kind of relevance. But association.
Oh, that's fascinating. Well, it's serving us all well.
Well, I just want to, I mean, I think it's actually a great place to draw this to a conclusion, which is that both of your work addresses sort of like a sinister specter of, you know, climate change and AIDS and death and loss, and I'm so appreciative that that actually wasn't the subject of our conversation. And I'm just thinking about like an experience of awe, and that the thing that both of you guys have done in your work is be in awe of the lives that you lived. And you know, like, I'm sure, especially to the students in this room, like you talk about, you know, a casual hangout with Nan Golden, and that really sounds like, wow, Nan was there, but you were hanging out with your friends and you took that seriously, and you were hanging out with the book and you took that seriously. And I just think that's a really beautiful place. since we especially have an audience of students, to
Yeah.
leave everyone is like, you know, take their lead, be in awe, take your life seriously, look carefully, listen carefully, follow your weird obsession all the way to the artists themselves. And we have about 15 more minutes in the gallery as the light fades. The big projections have not yet even been revealed to us, so I really encourage you guys to stick around and then come out on the lawn with us around 7:20 to, did I get the time right? 7:15, sorry, to look at the projections from the outside. So
I just want to end it with one quote. The Russian painter Pavel Chalichev, who was the lover of Charles Henry Ford, who I cured his work. So Pavel Chalichev said that Gertrude Stein would bring a chair to sit in your life. And I love that. I feel like, you know, like we're sitting in their lives and they're sitting in ours, and I love that.
Amen. Thank you.